Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show on the Operation Freedom platform. I am honored to have back with me one of the leaders in infectious disease in North America, Dr. Abdu Sharkawy. A little background on Abdu. He completed his training in internal medicine at the University of Toronto and then completed his infectious disease fellowship at the University of British Columbia. He is currently an internal medicine and infectious disease consultant with the University Health Network in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Just a little bit north of where I am from here at the in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Detroit, Michigan. Abdu wrote an article that has gone viral that I circulated amongst many of you who are watching this, and it was entitled "My Turn: Mass Panic May Be Worse Than the Virus Itself." Very quick at the very beginning, and then I'll let Abdu take this. Here's what Abdu wrote. He really set an incredibly positive tone of how we should be handling this situation. I'm not scared of COVID-19. I am concerned about the implications of a novel infectious agent that has spread the world over. I am rightly concerned for the welfare of those who are elderly, in frail health, or disenfranchised who stand to suffer mostly. But I am not scared of COVID-19. What I am scared about is the loss of reason and wave of fear that has induced the masses of society into a spellbinding spiral of panic. And I can tell you, having practiced medicine for 32 years, I shared those very same concerns. Abdu, it's an honor to have you here. Thank you for your time. I know you're incredibly busy.
Thank you for having me, Dave. It's a pleasure.
Abdu, what I just read in your introduction that you wrote in that fantastic article that went viral, have you changed your mind about COVID-19, about the coronavirus since you wrote that?
It's a good question, and it's one that I get asked very often. And I guess I would say that the principles that drove me to pen that piece haven't really changed. However, certainly my level of concern has heightened. It would be naive and patently irresponsible to say that I really haven't changed in terms of my attitude at all, given the fact that we're now seeing countless cases both here in Canada and in the United States. And I think for a while we felt we were somehow sheltered from this virus, that we were insulated, that this is sort of a foreign plague, which is something exotic and strange, and it happens in China, and, we're going to be fine. And we're still likely going to be fine, but we have to find the right approach and the right balance between vigilance, common sense, and mass hysteria. I still think we are having trouble dealing with that, and I still think that the hysteria and the fear-mongering is getting the better of us. So if you're asking me, have I changed my opinion? Not principally, but certainly I'm more concerned than I was 3 weeks ago.
A heightened awareness, if you will, a heightened sensitivity to it at this point. And many people, Abdu, are saying the following. When we look at the United States statistics, for the influenza virus every year, the CDC put out from October 1st, 2019 to March 1st, 2020, there were 34 million cases of influenza diagnosed, 25 to 50,000 deaths just in the United States, 350,000 hospitalizations. And folks say, the president even said it. I didn't realize it was that bad. That's very disconcerting. And now people say, okay, well, that's bad, and wow, surprised I've been living okay. I mean, I get the flu, but I didn't realize that many people died from it. And people are saying, well, wait a minute. So we've had the virus circulating for almost a month now, 3/4 of a month, maybe at least a half a month. And right now in the United States, I checked the Johns Hopkins site right before we went on air, 5,700 cases. Obviously, that's going up as we're testing better. But the key thing that my infectious disease professors used to tell me is, in fact, I got railed on at a grand rounds one time when I was talking about the increase in the number of cases. And this was actually during the AIDS epidemic. And my professors hammered me, said, don't tell us about the number of cases. Tell us about the case fatality rate. This is what, don't as you test more, you're going to get more. Tell us about the case fatality rate. Okay. Right. So when I look at the case fatality rate, there were 94 deaths over this time. It works out in the United States to 1.6. If you look at better data out of South Korea, their case fatality rate is about 0.8 to 0.9. Many people are saying, well, wait a minute. If 25,000 to 50,000 people in the United States die of the flu every year, and we got 5,700 cases in about a month, when if over that same 5-month time period there were probably millions of the flu and thousands of deaths, and we have 94 deaths, although 94 too many. Why should we be locking down a country where the shelves are being stripped, where you can't go to a restaurant or bar, even if you're healthy and not elderly? What do you say to those folks, Abdu?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, it's sort of a tricky comparison because the flu obviously has been with us for hundreds of years. We know historically of the 1918 pandemic, the Spanish flu, and, it seems to be something that people romanticize about as part of history. But the fact of the matter is the flu is with us every year. We kind of get used to the flu, but you're right, and to illustrate and to highlight that the flu kills a lot of people. And one of the good things that maybe has come out of this is the fact that maybe people are going to take the flu more seriously and are going to recognize that this is something that happens every year. It doesn't need to come from Wuhan. It can come from across the street. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, there are some distinct differences between influenza and COVID-19. And I think first and foremost is the fact that we don't know quite as much about the transmission of it in terms of the duration of infectivity. And the fact is it can spread a bit more insidiously and unpredictably than influenza. It's very unlikely that somebody with influenza is going to be able to transmit an infection through an entire 2-week period. We have seen enough of that with COVID-19 that it should make us a little bit more leery of who's going to be in contact with whom and how easily somebody could become infected. It seems as though it is certainly a bit more transmissible than regular seasonal influenza. So again, when you're in a close quarters or you're in a densely populated space, the likelihood for this spreading much more rapidly than influenza, whether you're in a population of healthy adults or you're in a population of older ones who are immune compromised, is higher. So I do think there is some degree of vigilance that is in order. It's a real shame that it's gotten to the point that we've had to invoke these measures that seem rather draconian and over the top. I think the trouble is, when do you get people's attention? When do you get people to finally start complying with hand washing, with proper health hygiene and infection control? And if you can invoke a great public education campaign and reach the masses, that's fantastic, especially if you can do that early on in the course of an epidemic. If you miss that quote-unquote window where the exponential curve is already on the inflection point up, it may be a little too late. So we're kind of behind the 8 ball at this point, and it would be hard to completely condemn some of the more severe measures that have been taken or are being now considered.
Abdu, January 31st, 2020, President Trump came out and put a travel ban on folks coming in from China into the United States. At the time, he was roundly criticized by what I call, if you will, some people still call the mainstream media, what I call the bought-off lamestream fake media, if you will. We're saying that this was outrageous, what he did, that this was an overreaction. It was over the top. There were other individuals who called him a xenophobe for doing this. In fact, Tony Fauci, and my dealings with him over the years has been very positive. I found him to be an outstanding scientist, very honest, apolitical, and it's going to tell you what you need to know, and you might not want to hear it. Dr. Fauci has come out from the NIH and said, look, this step was a very important step to take and potentially saved many people in the United States and North America by him doing that. As an infectious disease specialist, do you believe Dr. Fauci is correct, or is there somewhere in the or is the Washington Post or some of these people who've called President Trump a xenophobe correct? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it was not an incorrect thing to do, and I think that travel bans certainly have a place and a role in curbing these epidemics and preventing pandemic spread. The problem is that they don't work in isolation. You can't simply put up a wall, if I can use one of Trump's own examples of how you can think you can solve a problem. You can't put up a wall and then determine that you're keeping the evil, and exotic plague out and go about business as usual. The problem that happened in the United States was that after doing that, there was a huge lag in any sort of administrative and logistical setup for getting testing done, and the supplies were not available, and the accessibility was just not there. And for a country of 330 million people to have done 14,000 tests, I mean, that's insane, frankly. And we're a tenth of the population here in Canada. We had 25,000 tests done just a few days ago, and we've ramped up to about 40,000 at this point. So, the responsibility is both from within and from without in terms of making sure you've identified cases that already exist. Mm-hmm. You can invoke as many travel bans as you want, but you have to remember, travel is happening right, left, and center. Travel may have occurred prior to people showing symptoms and knowing that they have been exposed to COVID-19. So a travel ban is only as helpful as it being a part of an overarching strategy of testing and identification of cases, so that you can get an idea of just how austere the measures you need to take are to curb further spread. And I don't think that was done.
And the testing issue is very important here. And I did a little background on that. I went back to 2009 when we had the swine flu epidemic here in the United States. The final statistics through the CDC were 12,500 deaths, 61 million Americans infected, 275,000 hospitalizations. When I went back and looked through the literature, there was it's almost deja vu. It was deja vu. There was this complaint about, well, the testing was inadequate initially when the swine flu started in April of 2009 here in the United States. And, the swine flu essentially ran its course by 2010. And the question I have, Abdu, that I don't know if anybody else is asking is, what happened after 2010 at the CDC? Because that was a pandemic. And they said right now, when Fauci comes out and these other experts come out and say, well, we really hadn't been geared up to test for a pandemic. One would think after, and maybe I'm wrong, I mean, set me straight. In 2010, after that pandemic, why didn't somebody at the CDC and NIH say, hey, we got caught behind the 8 ball on this one. We need to set up a testing matrix so that when the next pandemic hits, all we have to do is plug and chug that genomic sequence into our testing, and boom, we're operational. Abdu, that didn't happen. And that started not just 2 months ago, but 9 years ago. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. And a lot of people have had the same sort of criticism to offer. And I think there's some legitimacy to those criticisms. I think we did get lulled into a bit of a sense of complacency, that we went through a period of several years where we were dealing with things as business as usual, and it was seasonal flu and nothing more than that. But we're certainly seeing the fallout at this point in time of not having a proper protocol in place. We've seen a lack of uniformity in terms of what different parts of the world have done in terms of their preparedness. And you can see very apparently and quite starkly the differences between those areas that were very prepared, that had a coordinated strategy, and those that weren't. Let me give you an example. So Hong Kong and Singapore and Thailand are very close to China, not far from the epicenter. Mm-hmm. All of these places did a fantastic job of, number one, keeping their population very well informed about what was going on. This was done in many cases through text messaging that was done on a mass basis to let people know about the degree of activity in the country. In addition, testing was ramped up very early. Social distancing campaigns were done in a way that were not made to create mass fear and panic, but rather to encourage people to engage in something before things got out of hand. And all of these places have shown a tremendous response in terms of the rarity of cases compared to everywhere else in Southeast Asia. Now, you compare that to Italy, for example. Italy is a first world country. Italy has a fantastic healthcare system, Just because it's in Europe and it's not somewhere where English is the first language, it's a pretty good healthcare system. Unfortunately, they waited too long for a cohort of people that became quite symptomatic for them to recognize that they, A, needed to ramp up testing, and B, needed more extreme strategies, which finally culminated in the entire country being put on lockdown. And guess what? It was too late. The entire healthcare system collapsed. They're running out of ventilators. Now people that are over the age of 80 are being left to die because there's simply no opportunity to help them. And that's a tragic example of waiting too long to get your ducks in order. And we have the narrowest of windows right now in North America to avoid falling into that same pattern. We don't want to do that. Now, the question is, do we have to freak out while we're doing that? Do we have to completely lose sense of how we can maintain our lives? No. It doesn't mean that we are all going to die and this is doomsday, but you wouldn't know that by going to Costco or going to Walmart and seeing what people are doing, thinking that canned tuna and toilet paper is going to save them and everyone else they know. We're going to get through this by people simplifying their lives, by staying at home, and frankly, the more things are locked down, the easier it becomes to do so, and by being patient and recognizing that if we do a little bit now, we're going to be a lot better further on down the road. It's a real shame you can't go see LeBron James. It's a real shame that you can't, watch Major League Baseball spring training happening. I'm a big sports fan. I hate that too. But I recognize this is a sacrifice we have to make. And hopefully it's not a long one.